And also, fear of death can't be a major cause of religion. The French are dying, the Hods are dying, but they're not religious. So that's just not true. Among most people, I'm not saying it doesn't affect some people, but among most people, that's not a main cause. And the same goes for everything else: social community, pattern recognition, gullibility, childhood gullibility into adulthood, memes and so on. They are not the primary causes of mass faith. Doesn't mean they don't play a role, but they're not the big factors. So I published a popular article in Free Inquiry a couple of years ago, The Big Religion Questions Finally Solved, which you can look into. And like I'm saying, it's just all this remarkable scientific research in this last few years has solved a lot of these big questions that we've been asking for years. So in that article, I put together what I call the triple threat to first world faith, which is that modern science, especially evolutionary theory, has removed all need for a cognitive creator and made belief in the supernatural something of a stretch. Mass secularization is not possible without the scientific rejection of the supernatural. The combination of middle-class prosperity secured by progressive policies, including job security, a social safety net, and especially universal health care coverage, has caused the citizens of progressive Western democracies to abandon the churches in droves. And then there's the corporate consumer popular culture, which is converting church-going citizens into materialistic, hedonistic consumers whose interests and desires increasingly diverge from those associated with traditional piety. For example, scientists have a high rate of disbelief in God. That's not an accident. It's because they're science-oriented, rationalists. Science does have an impact on religion at the intellectual level. And also on the left, on the bottom is a measure of religiosity that I came up with. It's in the evolutionary psychology paper. And it takes up 6 factors: absolute belief in God, rates of prayer and church attendance, Bible literalism, levels of atheism, acceptance of evolution, and so on. And also absolute belief in God on the right. And then on the left is accept human evolution. And you can see the United States has the lowest rates of acceptance of evolution, the most religious of the Western democracies. And Denmark, for example, is way up on the right. Low levels of belief in God and religion, and high rates of acceptance of evolution. And you can see the same correlation with absolute belief in God. So there really is a correlation between these things, between what science is hurting religion. And there's people who deny this, who try to say that people can accept evolution and religion at the same time. It doesn't really work out. Now we're going to get into the economics. This is the same Pew plot I showed you earlier. And if you took out the United States, you might just conclude sheer prosperity, per capita income could have a big effect on religion, which it does to a certain extent. But the United States is the outlier, and it's been the mystery. Why is the United States so unusual in being unusually religious for a Western nation with a high level of prosperity? And this is adjusted per capita income versus my religiosity scale. Again, the United States being the least religious, and some of the Western nations being very highly non-religious. No correlation. So that's not it. Per capita income is not the answer. In the evolutionary psychology paper, I built upon the work of others to get a better explanation of what's going on. And here we're starting to see something. This is income inequality in the Western democracies. The United States having the highest income disparity, Scandinavian nations, including Denmark and Japan, being the opposite, and there's a very good correlation here. And the book that talks about this most is Sacred and Secular by Norris and Engelhardt. You have to read this book if you want to understand this stuff. So this is the same plot I showed you earlier. I ran a Pearson's R correlation on it. I got a result of 0.8, which is very, very high. I mean, this is just about as good as you can get. So why do we have this correlation? I do want to point out one thing, is that although it's true, I'm going to be pointing out that prosperity equals non-religion. Non-prosperity doesn't necessarily mean being highly religious. Again, the Hods are very impoverished. The Chinese 1,000 or 2,000 years ago weren't living in the kind of nice lifestyles we are now. So having a high level of poverty does not necessarily require religion. Just wanted to make that clear. Also, we're looking at societal factors here. These are homicides. Again, there's the religiosity scale down at the bottom. Homicides and incarceration, the United States is the U. The United States has insanely high homicide rates compared to all other first world nations. Among first world nations with low religiosity, there isn't that much difference between the level of religiosity and homicides, although again, the most secular are the ones with the lowest levels of homicide. And in terms of incarceration, the United States has kind of gone insane. We put in more people in prison than China, all of China, mainly on drug charges, nonviolent drug charges and such things. Again, we have far, far higher than the secular nations. And we're looking here both at factors that are contributing to the levels of religiosity, but also we're testing the idea, do you have to have a religious society to have a well-run society? Well, if that were true, then the United States should have the lowest homicide rates and the lowest incarceration rates, but the opposite is true. And this is a long-standing thing, too. The United States has long had high homicide rates compared to Great Britain. The United States at the top, Great Britain at the bottom since 1900. And there have been levels of difference in religiosity. De Tocqueville noted in the early 1800s the United States was unusually religious at that time. This is under 5 mortality rates and life expectancy compared to the level of religiosity. And it was that top plot that when I did that, nobody had ever done this kind of research before. And I didn't realize at the time when I did that upper plot, I really got shocked. That really got me into this research. And again, the United States has the highest juvenile mortality, the most Christian country in the West, while the more secular ones have lower, and it's an excellent correlation too. In life expectancy, now unfortunately life expectancy is a little bit weird because Denmark, until recently, people were dying awful fast. And I'm not sure why, but otherwise there is a fairly good correlation, and this has also changed, by the way. Denmark no longer has the shortest lifespans of Western democracies is the United States. And in some parts of our country, lifespans are actually decreasing, which is shocking. That's what started happening in the Soviet Union. And that happens to be in the most religious parts of the country. The divorces, again, Christians are often railing against how if you're not godly, you're going to get divorced, then you're not going to have good family values. And the United States has the highest divorce rate except for Sweden. There isn't a very good correlation here, but it's showing that the United States doesn't have, that having high rates of religiosity doesn't necessarily help you. These are gonorrhea and syphilis infection rates. The United States still has epidemic levels of gonorrhea and syphilis infections. In parts of Scandinavia, these diseases have been, in parts of the most secular part of the world, these diseases have almost been eliminated. Birth rates, again, the Christian line is that you can have good family values if you want to not get pregnant during your, when you're in your teens. You need to have good, solid Christian family values, and the opposite is true. Same with abortions. Abortions in the United States has unusually high abortion rates. So what I did is I put this all together into what I call a successful society scale. I got homicide, incarceration, juvenile adult mortality, suicide, STD infections, teen pregnancy, abortion, fertility rates, marriage, and marriage duration, divorce, alcohol consumption, corruption, life satisfaction, per capita income, income disparity, work hours, employment levels, and poverty rates, and resource exploitation. And nobody had ever put this together before, a really broad, comprehensive comparison of socioeconomic conditions in the Western world. The United States does perform well in some things. It performs well in alcohol consumption. Americans don't drink all that much, actually. Corruption, we do pretty well. Life satisfaction, employment levels, we do well. But overall, when I tallied it up on a 1 to 10 scale, you can see that Denmark is scoring a 7, it's a 0 to 10 scale. The 10 is the best in terms of societal performance. So Norwegian countries are doing very well. The Scandinavian countries are doing very well. Then you have a gradation down to the United States, which only scores a 3, which is really shocking. So religion is not producing a positive effect. And one of the questions we have here is religion contributing to these problems, causing the societal problems, or societal problems driving the level of religiosity? And we can get a bit of a sense of this is that some recent polls have indicated that Danes are the happiest people on the planet. And we have to be a bit careful about that. This may not necessarily be true, but still it's showing that highly secular countries can do very, very well. Uh-oh, this is not working. Darn it. For some reason, the graphics are not showing up. So what I'm going to do, well, I'm just going to go ahead and use this. What's basically happening is this. In Europe, you have a progressive set of social policies that combine universal health care, a level of job security or protection if you don't have a job, retirement security. Also, things are going, the levels of violent crime are relatively low, of other societal dysfunctions, of teen pregnancy, and so on and so forth. So basically, people have a very high level of personal security. And when it comes to Sunday, are you going to go to church and worship God and seek aid and protection? Or are you going to go for a hike or go kayaking on the canals of Copenhagen, which I know people do a lot. And basically, people are going for the secular option because they don't feel this pressure to seek the aid and protection of the gods. And that's a lot of what's going on here. People don't believe in the gods because of their fear of death or because they're genetically pre-programmed to do it. They're looking for something. They're trying to cut a deal with God. Say, if you help me, I'll worship you back. That's no longer happening in the secular progressive societies where people get the highest levels of societal protection and prosperity combined. On the contrast, in the United States, we have a system that's much more Darwinian, it's libertarian. You're more on your own, and if things go bad, you're in more trouble. In the United States, you can have a middle-class family. They can be doing very upper middle class. They've been doing great jobs, the big McMansion, nice SUVs. The breadwinner gets laid off suddenly. They get very little employment compensation.